And the next session will be a speech for MSP Maggie Chapman, Scottish Green Deputy Convener of the Scottish Government's Equalities, Human Rights and Civil Justice Committee. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for coming along this afternoon, and thank you for inviting me to say a few words. I am Maggie Chapman. I am the Scottish Green MSP for the North East of Scotland, and I am here today to bring you solidarity and good wishes from all the Scottish Green MSPs who stand in solidarity with you as we seek to fight for the freedom of Hong Kong, for the freedom of Southern Mongolia, for the freedom of the Uyghurs, and for the end to the human rights abuses at the hands of the Chinese government. Many people argue that we should keep sport out of politics and politics out of sport. I grew up in Southern Africa at a time when apartheid South Africa was being boycotted, and there were calls for sports boycotts of South African national teams. Calls for boycotts from within the country and around the world to build solidarity, to build understanding of what was going on and what oppression black South Africans were facing at the hands of the apartheid South African government. Boycotts work. We know that they can put pressure on not only the targeted governments, but on international communities to ensure that we get the messages that we need to get out to people who can act. We also need to make sure that the International Olympic Committee hear this. They have very, very clearly stated the Olympic truce that says all humanity is called upon to lay down its weapons and work towards building the foundations of peace, mutual respect, understanding and reconciliation. The Beijing 2022 Winter Olympics is set to take place amidst one of the world's worst crackdowns against freedom, democracy and human rights. At least 2 million Uyghur, Kazakh and Uzbek Muslims are detained in re-education camps undergoing systematic torture, rape and political re-education. Tibetan children are being removed from their families for political indoctrination. There are human rights abuses widespread in Hong Kong, Southern Mongolia, and they are escalating. There is geopolitical bullying of Taiwan, and detention and disappearances of countless Chinese lawyers, feminists, and other activists. And this is just what we know about. The International Olympic Committee said over 20 years ago that having the Summer Olympics in Beijing in 2008 would enhance human rights by shining a light on bad behavior, creating the conditions for improvements. They could not have been more wrong. Now the IOC has ignored calls from frontline communities and human rights groups around the world to move or postpone the Winter Olympics this year. Boycott seems to be the only way left open to ensure we do not endorse Chinese human rights abuses. Because we know that China is one of the world's worst human rights abusers, with appalling activities across China, Tibet, East Turkestan, Southern Mongolia and Hong Kong. And President Xi Jinping has overseen all of this. Others here will know much more than I do, will be able to speak much more eloquently and passionately than I can about the current situation in Tibet. But I do want to say that we cannot turn a blind eye to what is happening. People from all walks of life are being targeted by China's crackdown, being imprisoned, tortured, raped, disappeared and murdered. We cannot continue with normal engagement and interaction. We cannot endorse these human rights abuses by doing nothing. With over 1,000 political prisoners facing torture and death and millions being held in re-education camps, both the United States and Canada have officially determined that China is committing genocide. And yet, the IOC does nothing. It won't move or delay the Games, and so boycott becomes necessary. A boycott would deny China the chance to turn the brutal and illegal occupation of Tibet, which has seen Tibet ranked as the least free country in the world alongside Syria, as well as the genocidal treatment of the Uyghur people, into a PR victory. We cannot let that happen. So boycott is what we need. A diplomatic boycott, not having our leaders sport wash genocide and the other human rights abuses, and a complete and full boycott, taking no part in the Games. China cannot be allowed to use the Games to showcase itself as a respectable, open and free country, when in reality it is the worst of worst for human rights abuses, for human rights atrocities, including the brutal occupation of Tibet and the genocide of the Uyghur communities. So we must stand with the right side of history and say no and boycott Beijing 2022. No to Beijing 2022. Finally, with all those taking action, I want to say solidarity to you. Solidarity to all of those acting here in Scotland, acting across the UK and around the world, taking action against the Chinese state and its abuses. Solidarity with those taking actions against those who sponsor the Games and allow them to go ahead. Solidarity with those who work desperately to aid and support those in dire need. And solidarity with all those working to end the occupation and genocide. Free Hong Kong, free Tibet, free Uyghur. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Chapman.